My Stars on ABC Radio Adelaide. It's good to have you along, and you might have been listening yesterday too when I spoke to student Isabella Spencer. Now, Isabella was 13 years of age and she had friends at Cairney, the aged care facility in Strathalbyn, which has suddenly been closed by Country Health SA. Here is a part of the letter she wrote to Health Minister Jack Snelling, which we visited yesterday.
Even though we went to the nursing home, it's not the same as Cairney. I just felt more homely because the old people like to show me their knitting, gardens and their homes and birds. And the old people in the nursing home don't do anything but sit and listen to us sing, but that's okay. One of my friends, Glennis, was forced to go to the hospital and live until she goes to the nursing home. She hates being in the hospital and doesn't want to live in the nursing home. Just let her go home.
Rob, good morning. You live in Strathalbyn.
For a small sum of money, in terms of state budgets of around $250,000, the building could have been upgraded, but also if it was deemed that it was only suitable to be kept on as low dependency, because that means that people would be fully ambulatory, there was no reason for closing the facility down.
Good morning, Rick.
Kenya has been a pain to say his government will consult and then make a decision. Now, unfortunately, behaviour doesn't match the rules, because there's been an issue since 2014. But all of a sudden, I mean, 3 years later, Country Health just closes facilities, no discussion with the community.
Well, last night there was a community meeting and Rick Cairney, who we heard from yesterday and is a resident of Strathalbyn, was there. Rick, what were the most important issues to come out of that meeting?
Well, there was a lot of anger about the way in which Cairney was closed, because there was no consultation with the community about the closure. It was basically announced, and that was it. And we must remember that the Cairney site was built in the early 1980s with community funding. They put a barometer on the post office so the residents could watch as the target for the money was reached. Now, Country Health SA continues to insist that the building can't be renovated to comply with the building code, which created the problem in terms of its ability to pass accreditation. But it can be. It's really all about the dollars. And we know that the Health Advisory Committee has over $100,000, which is earmarked for Strathalbyn. Now, it will cost more to renovate the building to bring it up to what's required, at $100,000. But we've got no doubt that the community would also contribute, and with a bit more money from the government, we believe that the building can be brought up to scratch. And that, some of the most vulnerable people, which are these elderly people who have just been moved out, have paid their taxes over many years, but they've moved out as far away as 70 kilometres from Strathalbyn, from their friends, from their family. So we keep hearing from the government that, calling the lead up to the 2014 election, that the minister himself was sort of saying the health of South Australians is the most important thing. But unfortunately, what we're seeing, and what we believe at Cairney, is symptomatic of what's happening with regional health. The anger last night was about the government's actions is not matching its political rhetoric. And what we want is transparency from Country Health SA, proper consultation, and ultimately we want these residents back in Strathalbyn.
Well, let's go to Vicki Deminski, who is Chief Executive of Health SA. Good morning, Vicki.
Good morning, Ali.
So why was this done without consultation? Why was Cairney closed?
So I think that when we're looking at Cairney, it's a slightly different circumstance, and that facility, as I have been told, was not going to meet accreditation. And in fact, when we were given the requirements, we knew that the retrograde fitting of that building was going to be inordinately expensive, and we did have capacity for alternate arrangements within Strathalbyn. So the decision was made. Tough decisions, I understand, but on the balance of what you do with country facilities, it was the only decision we could take at the time. There was a very limited consultation, and we know that residents are going to say they want to stay where they are, they want to be as close to home, and that's what we try to do, but we also have to balance that with how we can make the most effective use of the facilities we've got. We're committed to country health. We've seen $850 million spent in country health on an annual basis, and that budget has gone up by 5% every year, which is more than the budgets of a number of the LHNs that we have. And we're looking at the distribution of service to make it safe and effective and quality care. And unfortunately, the Cairney hospital wasn't going to be that.
How expensive was it going to be then to change it?
So there were minor modifications that people have talked about in the past that would have cost close to $1 million, and that wasn't unreasonable. But we weren't going to be able to fix all of the mobility issues and the new higher grade issues with just minor renovations. So the estimate that we had received was a new building would cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $7 million. And when we had capacity at Strathalbyn, it didn't seem to make sense to spend that.
Let's return to you then, Rick. $5 to $7 million is a lot more than any of the residents or any of you have told me. Why are both of you coming in with different sums?
Well, can I just come back to one thing? I mean, Vicki said that there have been alternative arrangements made for these people in Strathalbyn. That's not true. Some of these people are being moved out 7 kilometres out to Birdwood. But also Vicki said just then that work to the effect that if it was up to $1 million, that's not unreasonable. So what I put back to Vicki, if Strathalbyn residents can come up with a plan to bring this building up to scratch for less than $1 million, will Country Health accept that?
Vicki Deminski, if Strathalbyn residents can come up and satisfy a plan that would be able to have this building brought up to scratch for the $1 million, would you support that?
We're always willing to talk to our country partners, and I don't want to negotiate on the radio. Certainly, we looked at the options and we moved on what we felt was the best option.
It is that moving, though, Vicki Deminski, that really seems to have people upset. Another thing that Rick said then was, some of these residents didn't get to stay in Strathalbyn. They've been moved 70 kilometres away from the people that need to support them. How can that be a good thing for people's health?
So we're looking at all kinds of options with our aged care facilities, and how is it possible for us to maintain with the Commonwealth licenses in the areas where they exist. Are there other opportunities for perhaps non-government agencies to come in and provide aged care in those areas? So we are going to maintain the licenses to ensure that if there are other options that we can get into, that we'll have the licenses available to do that. I think, again, it's one of the factors, when you start looking at where facilities are and where we have services, there are going to be some changes. We've seen it in Yorktown as well. Now we're going back to consult because I was certainly under the impression until yesterday that the physicians were in agreement with the moves that were being made from a safety perspective. Heard yesterday they're not, so we need to go back and revisit that with Yorktown. But facilities everywhere in populations that used to be bigger than they are, they're shrinking. We have to look at the co-location of service now and come up with what makes sense from a sustainable and from a high quality and safe perspective.
But Vicki, is there a bit of a disconnect? We had that story, and we were following that story with regards to the Yorktown Operating Theatre, which we're now talking about, earlier this week, and we had the head of Country Health saying that they were working in partnership with the rural doctors, one of whom was on my show, unequivocally saying that they are unhappy that it is closing. How is it only then getting to you, way down the track, to then go back and say, okay, we're going to go back to consultation about it? How does it go through all of those hoops only to start back at the beginning again?
I'm not sure we're starting back at the beginning, and certainly what we're going back to see is what caused the physician who's responsible for the service and was working with us and suggesting that it needed to move. What caused that mind change, and is there information that we're not aware of? I know when you had Marie Garrity on yesterday, that similar to what she was saying, was physicians were supportive of this and looking at one of the only options that we had. There are only 60 operations a year that are done in Yorktown. That's one a week. And being able to maintain a service where you have such a small number both from a competency and a quality and a safety perspective, is challenging. So when the physician who I believe is getting ready to change the work he's doing had said, that those probably should move, we were acting on that to move those services and to look at what's best. I don't know that the outcome will be any different. I know our head of surgical services in SA Health believes that much like any other procedure, there's going to be a number that you have to do to maintain your competency. And so if we're not able to maintain competency of the clinicians and the nurses in the area, then we're going to have to look at ways to either move service or to provide that backup so that services can be provided.
So sorry, Vicki, to cut you off, but just for time here, let's then return to Cairney and what is happening at Strathalbyn. In much the same way that you are going back and looking at that consultation process with Yorktown, could you now sit down and work with the Strathalbyn community and you said you weren't going to negotiate over the radio, I understand that, but will you now sit down with them and have another look at what is happening with Cairney?
There's no question that the residents are passionate, and that young gal that
Isabella, yep.
I'm very impressed with her, and I certainly hope that when she grows up she wants to be involved in health policy and health planning, because we can use those kinds of bright minds. We'll always talk to our communities. We'll always have discussion. I'm not suggesting that we're going to be looking at a different outcome though for Cairney.
Have you already got the land earmarked for something?
No, not at all.
What are the plans for the Strathalbyn Hospital?
So what do you mean?
If we're talking about, because the first thing you said with these residents is that a lot of them got to stay in Strathalbyn, relying on maybe the hospital or other services in that area.
Yes. Well, there are some services that are available there, and we're going to keep those services and maintain those services at the Strathalbyn Hospital.
Rick, I know our line and the connection between you and Vicki is bad, but you've been listening to this. How do you feel?
Well, I don't get much comfort from what Vicki is saying, unfortunately. Because, again, it's a lot of nice rhetoric. But, at the end of the day, it's the results of the truth. And Vicki said that, there's a shrinking number in the Strathalbyn catchment area. That is not true. In fact, Strathalbyn has a significantly higher population of 65 to 84-year-olds. And that is expected to rise by 60% over the next 15 years. And there is a waiting list, as well as the residents that were in the hospital. There's a waiting list for more to come in. So, when I heard Vicki say they're going to consult Yorktown, but the results likely to be the same. So, I'm not getting much comfort. We want to sit down with the country what they say. But I come back to what I put to Vicki. She said that words to the effect that up to $1 million to spend to renovate this was not unreasonable. So that's where we'll be headed with this country's healthcare fund. Is I think we can come up with a plan for wasting that money to fix the problem. So if she sticks to what she said about the $1 million, I think we can come up with a plan to fix it.
Well, Vicki Deminski, Chief Executive of Health SA, and also Rick Cairney, resident of Strathalbyn. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
We will continue to follow this. A lot of you are calling and texting. Ben from Melbourne says the state Labor government is prepared to cut health in the country as there aren't many votes in the country for Labor. Lorraine says this is sounding just like a bean counting exercise to her. Somebody else, Leslie, it's spin. Country people again being ignored of their needs in the communities. Raylene, you live near Strathalbyn and you were at the meeting last night. Good morning.
Good morning. Vicki just said that the future usage of Cairney has not been earmarked for anything. Could she please tell me then why new curtains have just gone in and the NBN has just been connected to this building?
I didn't know that. Right.
We're very concerned that it is going to be turned into a hostel for refugees or some similar area. Also, in regards to the Yorktown Hospital, last night this gentleman was saying, yes, there were only 60 operations, but there are hundreds of procedures done which are not classified as operations, but they still need the theatre for.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just a juggle of beggars to suit the government's health issues.
Well, Raylene, again, we will continue to follow this. We will continue to follow up. We will stay in touch with Rick and Isabella, and also yourself, anybody else. Remember, you can contact me anytime about anything, either via phone, text, or you can even email me direct, okay? Adelaide Mornings at abc.net.au. In a moment...